kind of starting off of really, what are we looking at today? What is Intacct? We're going to go into the actual software, go into a little bit of some of the APIs. We're going to talk about a lot of those, some of the integrations as well. Dive into several different sections on that front, kind of give you guys a good understanding of some of the features that are available to you guys in Intacct. And then at the end, any questions that come up, happy to address those as we go through that. All right. So as going to the next screen, really, what is Intacct? And I really think that this slide is a good representation of it. Intacct is essentially a internet accounting place. That's actually where it got its initial name from, is Internet Accounting Intacct. But essentially what happens here is it's a cloud-based platform allowing us to integrate with several different companies, hence that open API, which essentially gives us not only better visibility, but it also, as you know, streamlines that workflow so much by having information automatically right back into Intacct or writing to whatever other system that we need to. And we'll touch more on that in a moment, and a lot of that best in class as we go throughout the presentation. So jumping here, I know there's a lot to look at and can be a little overwhelming, but what I always hear a lot of feedback is, well, you know, Intacct's so new, and that's really far from the case. Intacct's been around since 1997. It is a very successful accounting system before the acquisition when Sage acquired them. But when they made that acquisition, Sage really wanted to enhance the features to its customers base, to give them the ability and give them the options to go to, you know, something that is cloud-based platform. And so when we're looking at the screen, you can see that there's a lot of different capabilities within Intacct, but some of those ones that have the little green lettering to it, those are systems that already existed inside Intacct, but they were enhanced with that acquisition to tailor around the construction and real estate marketplace. All right. So just wanted to kind of give you a high-level overview of what that looks like. And honestly, with that being said, I want to dive right into the software. So as we go into the software, and let me jump back one screen. Actually, let me scroll out of here, just make it easier on me. So as we jump into the software, what we're first looking at is the Intacct platform. Several things I always like to reiterate is, again, it is that open API. So really, if there is any of those third-party vendors or outside companies that you want to have an integration with, whether that is the Sage real estate modules or Sage, the estimating modules, whether that is Procore or CoreCon or TimberScan, whatever those systems are, Intacct's going to be able to integrate with those. Other thing I always like to mention is when you do have updates in Intacct, and there's 4 major updates done every year, you can find those on the home page, which they'll be displayed, and then you can also be able to see the contents of what each of those updates are. But those 4 major updates, any of those vendors who are on the Sage Intacct marketplace, which you can Google to find all of the vendors, essentially are guaranteeing that once that update occurs, you're not going to see any different, or you're not going to see any issues with that. So no longer the days of having to have a IT department to come in, install the update, then test your integration. The updates are done automatically, and any of those vendors are essentially, again, guaranteeing that that integration won't break when you get, when you get an update. So really, just going back to that streamlining of workflow. We don't want to disturb your workflow that is already there with, you know, wasted time of trying to solve these problems. It's all taken care of. All right. So when we're starting to dive into the program, a couple things I always like to explain is over here on the top tab, you'll see my name. I'm currently logged in as an admin user, essentially giving me the power to see and do essentially anything that I need to in the system. And that goes to really 3 of the major user types. You have your business license, which is, again, like I said, the admin. You're also going to have project management licenses, which typically are going to allow us just to have visibility into things like our project, entering time and expenses. If we're creating purchase orders as well in the field, we can be able to do so from that. So anything really job specific, and they're not going to have any visibility, especially if you want to limit that. not to have any visibility into your other modules such as the AP, cash management, GL, or anything like that. Last license is just going to be your strictly employee license. Where I typically see this in play is with a lot of users who just need to either view specific things, kind of like a view only, or even employees who just strictly need to enter in their time and expenses, and that's it. That's where that employee license will come in. So again, we can allow them to view things like our projects, but they're not going to be able to edit or add anything like that. I do also want to reiterate or even highlight that every one of these licenses, even though they're broken down to as kind of 3 major buckets, you can also get very nitty-gritty with the roles and the rules and responsibilities to what people have, view, or enter in the system. Okay. Another thing going on with navigation, again, we have this application menu or this drop-down screen that we see on screen, but you might see that some of these also have stars. This goes into the second way to navigate. These are going to be our favorites tab. These are user specific or user defined, and these will allow us just to essentially each of those users quickly click on a module of the software, or even a dashboard like we see in the background, or even a standard report or something along the lines of that. So if you wanted to see your WIP report every day or be able to click on that without having to go into your reports module and making all those unnecessary clicks, this is just going to help streamline that process. All right. Other way to navigate is over on the bookmarks. These allow us to get a little bit more granular than favorites. So as opposed to just going into the purchase orders modules, this allows us to narrow down to a specific transaction, or in this case, a specific purchase order that we have here. So again, just to be able to navigate different options that you guys are going to have available to you. Last way to go through the navigation process is going to be over here on the search field, where this is really comes into play with, especially if you want to search on a specific module, the entire system. You may know the specific number. So for instance, a vendor calls you and says, hey, I have a question about bill 1133. I can go ahead and search for that bill to be able to see either the entire system or, in this case, just the specific bills module. And when that goes out and searches it, it's going to find anything that meets that criteria or that naming convention. So again, if there's bill 1133-A1, A2, A3, whatever the case might be, it will pull in all of those numbers that meet that search information. So opening up this particular bill, again, you're going to see a lot of kind of summary information. And I think Intacct does a great job of that. Hey, at a glance, how are we doing on some specific matter? So in here, you can see when the bill is due, how much has been paid, what still is due, wherever the bill is kind of currently at. And then over on the right, you might see is the attached file. I can have a side-by-side image to allow us to go and see the actual invoice, the bill, whatever the case might be. And as we scroll down, again, what we'll have here is going to be more information. So like I said, Intacct will summarize a lot of the data, and then when we need to see more or drill down into it, we're going to be able to see each of the entries as well. If we go over in history, I know I don't have it on this particular case, but you would be able to see if we've partially converted this invoice, each of the different invoices that have converted on this bill, or how we paid that. Again, just a different way to give you kind of an audit trail of exactly what's happened on this particular, in this case, bill 1133. Other thing I want to elaborate on is you might have noticed that some of the vendor information is incorrect. And a couple different ways is either A, pending that you have the rights, and then we set you up with the rights to do that, you can have those users be able to go in here, edit anything, and make any necessary changes, and you're not having to jump out of each of these different modules to do that. It's a lot more linear, right? Or option B as well, say maybe we're an owner and we're going to delegate someone to go ahead and take care of that, but you might have noticed that. You can see if I scroll all the way down to bottom, down here I've messaged Michael Scott saying, hey, this is assigned to an incorrect project, please fix immediately. And this is what we call Intacct collaboration. This is a way that you can have those users just in your organization message each other to be able to kind of have an additional audit trail. So no longer the days of, oh, I emailed Michael about that, or I saw him in the hallway and I told him he needs to address it. I guess he never did. you get rid of a lot of those excuses to have in the system, and we start to build out, like I said, that audit trail. Now, what happens on Michael's end is a couple things. Is up here in the top, he will see a little notification. Think of it similar to like a text message or something like that. He'll see a notification saying, hey, you have a new collaboration message, click here, and he'd be able to go and click that link and takes him directly to this bill. Other thing that also will apply is he'll receive an email notification. And the nice thing with that email is it doesn't give you a generic, hey, you have a collaboration message, click the link and go into Intacct. No, in the body of the email, it actually highlights what the question has been asked. And then when you click on the link, again, it doesn't take you to the generic page of a home page and you got to find out where that link is. It takes you directly to wherever the question is being addressed. So in this case, Bill 1133, right? Now, I do want to specify that the Intacct collaboration function isn't just on bills. It is scattered throughout the system. So whether you have questions on projects, purchase orders, whatever it is in the system, you're able to ask those questions like we did with this bill, and then those users can go to wherever that question is being asked, all right? So again, just one of those ways where we can navigate and search throughout the system. So as I jump back to our dashboards, I'm going to go back to that CFO dashboard. I'm going to jump through a couple different ones today. But really here, what I want to highlight is there's several different ways to combine these dashboards and reports. These dashboards can be user defined. You could also create these to have each of these different roles, as I have here as an AP manager, so I can view more of my purchase orders transactions, or executive bill, executive one that gives me maybe more high level information, or even the project performance one, which we'll click in a moment. All these different dashboards also, just like our licenses, can also be hidden or based upon who has visibility to see that. So whether that is role specific or individual user, you guys can delegate that in the settings field to who's going to have the option to view those. All right. So a couple different things to explain with these dashboards. They're really made up of three major components. So in this top field here, these are what we call the performance cards or KPIs. These are just essentially saying, I want to be able to view something on a specific metric. So in the cases on the screen, you can see, we can see net income, revenue, working capital, any operational expenses that we've had or occurred thus far, all of that kind of information. But again, it's just meant to be at a glance, how are we doing on a specific matter? Down in the lower left, you can see these are our standard charts, graphs, things like that. These are really going to give you a visual representation. Typically, it's more expand upon than just the performance cards. So as opposed to just seeing, profit of overall how we're doing, I can break it out into each of the individual projects to see that the performance of all of those. And then over here on the lower right-hand side, you're going to see your traditional reports. These are going to pretty much give us the greatest level of detail in the system. And so we can always view that or manipulate also these different slides, however we really need to. So example of that too is if I go over the project performance, again, you can see here is the different slides that we have in screen, different layouts here. But the nice thing with Intacct is not only that we're going to be able to have these slides created, but over here on the top, we can have multiple entities. So what this is doing is this is giving us essentially a consolidated view to each of those entities. So we went from in this construction project to having 20. Now you can see we have 11 active jobs. So again, it's summarizing all of those entities where we're now going into one specific one and breaking out how are we doing without having to completely recreate a dashboard or completely redo a specific report. Excuse me. Let's see if that outlet works. And perfect, that one worked. So again, just to allow us to get that level of detail. Now, as we scroll over here on the ribbon, you might see, you can obviously go back to any historical dates. So if you want to see the performance of how we did a year ago or several, we can go back to see that performance. But over here goes into the really power of the dimensions. Essentially, dimensions allow us to tag several different transactions in meaningful way for us to then report off of. So if I go into my reports, you can see here's a list of all the different transactions for us to then report off of. And when we go into here, if I wanted to see maybe my performance of the service department or my construction, again, I can start to filter out these out. Or if we have multiple locations under one entity, I can also filter those out to get an overall scope of how those individual entities are doing. Again, all of this functionality is all built in with Intacct's dashboards and can be accessed on whatever we want to see that information, okay? Another thing to highlight out, when I was in this dashboard, we might have a superintendent or a project manager or someone say, hey, Jared, I got a project here. We're working on this La Quinta, right? And even though we see all this information, under the cost, he says, I'm not recognizing this $12,000 charge. So what I can do from my end is click on this 275,241, open that up, and I'm actually drilling into that information. So how did I get that number? What is that total of it? So not only that we're seeing the cost of accounts, you can see your labor, subcontracts, but I can see here under this Kingston Plumbing, there is that $12,000 charge. So from here, again, drilling into that information to see more about, okay, I see the 12, expand on this. I want to know more of where this is. And I can see here is bill 1133. So as you remember, there's several different ways to navigate that, whether we're on our search field, we're drilling into information, or going to a module. Regardless of how we get to that endpoint, there will always be those 7 different scenarios that come up. And just like before, I can either add this or even, edit this if I need to, or do whatever information I need to take care to be able to accomplish my job at hand. So again, just multiple ways to get to that same endpoint, if you will. All right. So a few other things that I always like to go through is when we go over into our reports, or actually, our projects. And as we open up the projects today, again, we're going to see this list of all the active projects that are currently being in the system. And when we have this list, again, depending upon your project management software that you might prefer, whether that could be Procore, could be Intacct itself and just leave it in here, could also be the Sage Construction Management, formerly known as CoreCon as well. Whatever that project is, we'll also go to some of those integration points. So whether we create those projects in that project management system or in Intacct, it can flow to whatever system that you want to. Again, going back to that best-in-class mentality. But in this particular case, I have a list of all of our active projects. You can view this in several different ways, the information we see on screen. Whether we want to change this to show me all of my in-progress jobs, I could also change it to show me just my warehouse jobs if I want to. Again, as you see, these are defined by me or defined by the user when we create that. And some of the options that you have available are quite extensive, and they could also include any sort of custom fields. So in this case, I just put a couple as example points, and I can just simply tell the system, hey, here's something that I want to record off of, and then also be able to filter or report off of, okay? So again, just different ways to see this information. But when we go back to the list of all the active jobs, I'm going to focus on today is just this Sam Jackson Hall one. And we're going to go ahead and view that. So under the Sam Jackson Hall, when we have this project, again, whether we hit add, new, or even just created it from here, this menu is going to look the same, where we're going to go through and be able to edit any of these fields. We can obviously put it the different stages of projects, the main contacts, as well as even project managers or sales contacts in this particular case. Where this can also come back to is what we call smart assemblies, or smart rules and smart events. With those smart rules and smart events, what they essentially allow us to do is help automate certain processes so you don't have to worry about that. Again, what I mean by that is maybe when we're creating a project, anytime I go and create a new project, it not only needs to have when the date begins, but when it ends, or the different stages, or even this project number, whatever fields you want to delegate for them to capture, you can build those rules where it says, hey, all of this information needs to be captured before you're able to save this as a project. And if they try to save it, it will come up with an error message saying, hey, you need to capture, X, Y, and Z fields prior to, or whatever you've delegated. Where the smart events come into place, think of those as more of, say the project is currently under bidded, right? And then we change this from bidded, we got the job, now it's in progress or awarded, whatever we want to next change it to. I can have the system automatically reference this project manager field and then be able to email that project manager saying, hey, you have a new project assigned to you. Click the link and go to Intacct to be able to view that, or whatever project management system you guys want to integrate with. All right. So again, just to build out some of those email automation logics in that. Other thing as well with those custom fields, as you see here, very straightforward to create. All you're essentially doing is telling the system what field it is, where you want it to be located, and that's it. So in this case, I wanted it to be a text field. I didn't want it to be a drop-down field or anything like that, and I wanted it under the project information, and now I'm able to report off that, capture that, and essentially do whatever I need to with that information. Now, scrolling all the way over here on the right, you're going to see our estimates. So obviously with different platforms, you can either input the estimate manually, but a lot of people will actually just import that through Excel. Intacct has several different import templates that we can pull that from. There's also integrations that are located on that Sage Intacct marketplace that will be able to go over these particular projects, or will be able to go over that information of pulling it in. But like everything, it's going to summarize the key data. And then when we want to expand on that, you can see here's each of the different line items, our labor cost, where we're sitting on whatever the field, but an entire breakout of the actual estimate. So again, just wants to summarize where that is and then the estimate. All right. As we jump back into the cost codes, again, these are going to be project specific cost codes that we set up, where we can tell when the beginning date is, when it expects to end. If you wanted to create a Gantt chart, you can create that, but also start recording the percent to complete of wherever we are working on that particular different stage. All right. Now, when we start to work on the project, obviously we're going to accrue different charges, and several ways to view that. But one, a project manager could come in here and look at the purchasing commitments and be able to see any purchase orders that reflect this. But not only that, if we're subbing out work, you can also see any subcontracts, the stages that those subcontracts are in. Again, are we started to build those out? Are they partially converted, or are we complete or taking care of that? Have they been built out accordingly? If I scroll to the top, you can also see any change orders that might have affected that initial contract price. But with all of this information available to us, over on the left-hand side of your screen, you're going to see there's those blue links, again, allowing us to drill down into that subcontract or that purchase order that we want to be able to see. So again, from here, I can be able to make any necessary edits, pending that you have the rights to be able to make those edits. You can make any necessary edits to that particular contract with your scope of work and entries and all of that information. All right. So moving on from here, going into the contract itself, again, I can pull in, and I'm going to be referencing my Sam Jackson Hall, but this menu can be changed and saved or added to any dashboard that we want to. So if we had a list of all active projects or inactive, whatever the case might be, the also type of project of how we're billing it out, is it T&M, are we progress billing, whatever the status or how we're doing that information out. And then when we open up the Sam Jackson Hall actual contract, you can see here's the original price, what change orders have been approved that would affect that price, what the revised amount will be, and then where we've billed out, and then what payment we might have received. So again, just to give you a high level of information of where we kind of currently sit. As you see with all the tabs, you can see all of the billing information. So if I wanted to be able to go into the billing detail to be able to see every document that's been created on this or referencing this record, that's where we can drill out and expand on a lot of that key information. But scrolling down here as well, you're going to see a lot of the basic information. So when you create this from the first time, a lot of these fields will also auto-populate based upon the project name or what project we're working on, as well as customer name. Underneath that, you'll see our summary. So it will also reference any pending change orders that we might have that might affect this contract. We'd be able to capture that or just keep tabs on that. And then scrolling down into the schedule of values, this is where we're going to start to see each of those different schedule of value line items, including, if we wanted to capture as a separate item, any change orders that would affect on that particular value here as well. This is also where we'd be able to affect that initial estimate cost price. So we're kind of keeping those budget numbers up to date, so we can see exactly if we want to see a budget versus actual or anything comparison like that. We can run several of those different reports. So jumping back in back here and going back into the purchase orders again, something I should highlight is over here in this change order field. I could be able to visually scroll into each of those different change orders to see the different statuses of those change orders and whether they've been pending, as any change orders as well affected this particular line or anything like that. So you can also drill down into the change order request, the initial part, with the blue hyperlink. So again, meant to be is there's several different ways. It's no longer kind of those siloed or those module ways to find information. It allows us to look into wherever we are and then drill into that key information without having to do that jumping back and forth. All right. So one of the last things I'm going to go into is down here, we're actually going to generate the invoice itself. So again, several different ways to have this. Again, if we're having a T&M, if we're billing by customer, project, or contract, we're going to select the value. And then based upon that, we're now going to select whatever template that's in the system, whether that's just a contract invoice that you have or an AIA format as well that you capture there. And then we're going to go into which projects. You're going to see that pulls from that contracts module that we've looked into, and I'm pulling my Sam Jackson Hall. And then for today, I'm just going to use, for demo purposes, I'm actually just going to go back to Monday for here, and we're going to hit preview. So this is where we start to populate and go through the entire process of submitting that application. All these fields are, again, automatically populated. Only thing I'm going to have to do is just change the application number. And then here's where we start to go to those schedule of values, those line items. A lot of these menus that you see as well can all be changed or manipulated. So typically if there's fields that you don't want to see, just an example could be like an external reference internal. If I don't want to see these or don't want to have this, I can hide that so that doesn't populate on the screen, and it doesn't have to scroll all the way back and forth to do as much as I need to. But in this case, I can see again, original price, any revisions or any change orders that we have. We can see down here, there's that change order. And then you can go through the process of typing in that next percent to complete. So in this case, if I wanted to do 78%, well, that's just going to be $1,000 that we're going to go out. Or if I want to even change down here to make this a bit more accurate, we'll go up to 10%. You can see now we're totally billing out in this period, $6,000 total. If you wanted to change any of these values or overwrite whatever the percent value is, you could absolutely do so. So if I wanted to say, I'm actually going to bill out, in this case, 1,500, you're going to say, well, in order to do so, it's not going to be 78%, it's going to go to 79%. So now we can start to calculate those out. Now scrolling all the way over to the right, again, you're going to start to see what we've billed out thus far, any remaining bills, and then also retainage as well that we've billed or gathered thus far. And then all the way over here on the right is the total retainage by the percentage that's all being calculated. Again, just like previous, we can overwrite those if need to. And then in the very bottom, you're going to start to see a summary of what we're billing out in each of these different periods, where we have left, all of that key information. And apologize to give you motion sickness, but as we scroll up to the top, you can see there is that total amount that we're billing out or invoicing out. From here, we're going to go ahead and create the invoice, and then it will actually bring us back to the original screen, so you could go to the next project and the next one and next forth. So now, in order to view it, again, several different ways to go to the same thing. So if you wanted to go back to your contracts page into that top tab I showed you in the billing. You could do there. You could also go into your invoices to be able to see every invoice in the system, and you can filter that into several different ways. In this case, I could see, well, this mostly is sample data, so I've been working in one project, but I can see exactly that project it is. And then when it comes to starting to apply payment, again, several different ways, whether we apply payment on an individual basis, or you can go into the pay them or apply payment and select multiple invoices. That's where we can start to actually apply that from here. All right. And last thing I wanted to show you, and I know there's a lot more of the software that we can go to, and happy to address that and set up more of a one-on-one with you as we need to. But last thing I always like to show is over here in the cash management module. So not only that we can track credit cards, all of our checking accounts, we can run reconciliations on those, but depending on some of those bank accounts that you guys work with, we can typically connect your bank account with Intacct, so you're essentially getting a live feed of that bank account, of what the activity in that. The disclaimer I will always say is you need to check with your bank account provider before. We've had it where I think it was Chase needed to have a specific tier, and so they wanted to make sure that they have that tier with the bank account prior to being able to connect that links. But essentially, again, you can connect your bank account back and forth. All right. So with that being said, I know we're going to wrap it up, and I'm going to show you one. So let me scroll all the way over to our one last thing before we turn it over to any questions. But just want to let you know of any upcoming events that we have. Again, for any new webinars, please visit the aktion.com/events to see all the newest webinars, whether that is Sage 100 or any of the platforms that Aktion has to offer. A couple other things as well. We are going to be at the Chicago Bill Expo and the CFMA event in the Carolinas. So if you are there, please reach out to us. Happy to see you guys, or even stop, have a conversation, maybe more about Intacct as well. But with that being said, I do want to thank everyone for your time if you are signing off. But we're going to use the remainder of time to go over any questions that that may have come up.
So I don't see any questions in the chat. So if anyone has anything they'd like to ask, please go ahead and enter that now.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you were very thorough today and nobody has any questions. You answered everything.
That's what I'm thinking. I just did such a great job because I had so much more time that no one has any questions.
Well, these are becoming routine for you.
Absolutely.
All right, it doesn't look like anybody has any questions. So
looks like we had one person who raised their hand.
How many current Intacct customers do we have?
Ooh.
You're asking the wrong people.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I think we have, I can't even think. I know that we have, last quarter we had about, I want to say 5 or 6 new customers with this. So it's definitely gaining a lot of traction. Obviously, with more enhancements that come out, they're getting a lot more of that. How difficult is it to switch from 300 to Intacct? I need to pay you because that's a perfect question to ask here. So Aktion has recognized that process is never going to be easy, right? And what we've done is there are some tools out there that Sage has created, but when we've taken some of those customers through that process, we just didn't find a lot of success with that. So we actually invested and created our own tool, migration tool, that will take your data. And without getting too in depth with it, obviously we're going to want to make sure that all the data moving over is correct, and we're not going to have any, integrity issues or any issues with that. So we'll do a couple test runs, but essentially we'll take that data and convert it into your Sage Intacct. So there are tools out there available to absolutely streamline that process. Great question. Mm-hmm.
Anyone else?
So one of the questions that did come in, does it integrate with HH2 payroll remote? Yeah, so really with the integrations, I mean, it's no longer like the 300 days where it's, is there a canned integration? Does it like, and if it's not really the ability to be built. With Intacct, there's a lot of ways that we can push and pull information, even if there's not an integration built that goes to your open API. However, I believe that if you go to the Sage Intacct Marketplace, again, Sage Intacct Marketplace, you can Google that, is what I do. But that will have a list of all of the authorized integration vendors that are guaranteeing that that integration is not going to break with any updates or anything like that. And I believe HH2 is on that list. But like I said, I would double check and go to that sageintacctmarketplace.com, and it'll tell you about the integration, the vendors that it integrates with. And I believe there's over 250 vendors that it integrates with.
Okay. If that's it, then we will sign off, and we thank you for taking the time out of your day today to be with us. We know you're all busy, so thank you again. And sorry for the inconvenience of our reschedule, but it was out of our control.
Absolutely. So thank you, everyone. I appreciate all of your time today.
Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.